If you follow my reviews in any sort of capacity, then you've probably seen me cover Atari's Recharged games. Over the last 2 years, I've looked at updated versions of everything from Centipede, to Breakout, to Black Widow, and have largely been impressed. However, there is one installment that I missed when it was first released, and that's Missile Command Recharged. You see, when it first came out, Missile Command was a low-price, no-frills kickoff to the Recharged franchise that lacked a lot of the extras that have become standard with the series. That original version has now been delisted, making way for a bigger, better version of the game with all the bells and whistles that you expect. This means that I finally have a chance to complete my collection and review Missile Command Recharged. Oh, was it worth the wait? Well, that's what I'm about to find out. Originally released in 1980, Missile Command wasn't like the other Atari arcade games. Instead of shooting down enemies or dodging asteroids, the goal of this game was to defend a small city from a barrage of incoming missiles. You did this by shooting your own missiles into the air, blowing up the incoming fire before they reached the buildings on the ground level. Equipped with little more than a trackball, it was a fast-paced and incredibly intense action game that immediately won over fans. This new, recharged version of Missile Command retains pretty much everything that people liked about that original arcade game, all while adding a bunch of explosive power-ups, new backgrounds, and different modes to stave off the inevitable repetition. It's a fun and exciting homage to the 40-year-old classic that doesn't try to bite off more than it can chew and never gets trapped into being more than it is. There's no greater story or crammed-in character development here. It's just a straightforward arcade game with redrawn HD graphics and a few extra items. Like all of the recharged entries, Missile Command is split up between an arcade mode and a mission challenge mode. The arcade side is pretty straightforward, where the goal is to shoot down all the missiles, keep your building standing, and go for the high score, which will appear in an online leaderboard. What I like about this arcade mode is that it takes inspiration from some of the more recent releases, giving us customizable options that allow the player to turn on modifiers that will not only make the score add up a little bit faster, but will also make the mode a bit harder. On top of the modifiers, there are also 4 different elements of the arcade mode that you can upgrade by spending points. This means that you can power up your attacks, improve the rebuilding, reload faster, and even increase the speed of your missiles. This is a fun addition that gives you a lot of incentive to keep playing the arcade mode, something that's been sorely missing from some of the past games. I can't help but feel like the arcade mode is slowly improving with each recharged entry. Of course, the real party is happening over in the mission mode, where we play through a bunch of small, bite-sized challenges. These allow for a bunch of different scenarios, where the main goal is to survive the onslaught with at least one building intact. Sometimes you'll be bombarded with speedy missiles, while other times you'll need to use a specific power-up to survive the attack. Even though you're always completing the same task, the levels do a good job of mixing up the dangers and feeling somewhat individual. That said, I miss the way that the Recharged series handled the mission modes in earlier games. It used to be that each level had a specific goal, such as reaching a certain score, or getting a big chain combo, or only using a single weapon to complete the level. Even with the different scenarios and types of attack, these missions come across as real repetitive. A little more variety would have been appreciated. Also, it's a little odd that you can only open up one challenge level at a time, whereas in past games you'd open up 3 at once. Yeah, it's a small thing, but having 3 missions open at once allowed you to try your hand at another stage if you got stuck on one especially challenging level. Unfortunately, the real problem here has little to do with arcade mode nitpicking. You see, Missile Command Recharged, well, it has control problems. Specifically, it needs a trackball. The analog stick is a poor alternative as it's not fast or precise enough for the high-level play. There's a lot happening at once, and zipping around the screen and getting ahead of the inbound missiles is a lot tougher than you might expect. Even with a lot of practice, I never quite got into the groove of this game. Other recharged titles lend themselves better to this style of remake, but Missile Command is different. It feels like it needs something like touchscreen support, but that wasn't an option in the PlayStation version that I played. And no, the DualShock's overly sensitive touchpad is definitely not a good alternative. On the other hand, I would say that from a visual perspective, Missile Command benefits the most from its recharged makeover. I like the neon colors and the minimalist look, and I'm a big fan of the changing backgrounds. We get mountains and the silhouettes of the far-off cities. This is a big improvement over even the original 2020 version of the game, which had a more simplistic background that consisted of a grid and space. Even the foreground structures, like the buildings and the missile launchers, have been completely redrawn. This is a sharp-looking game. Unfortunately, Missile Command Recharged ends up being a bit of a mixed bag. While it's certainly better than the 2020 version and has a lot of fun bells and whistles, it's ultimately one of the weaker games in the series. And let me tell you, it's not from a lack of trying. No matter how many cool ideas they come up with, Missile Command continues the long tradition of being an incredibly hard game to get right on a home console. Not to be confused with the 2020 release with the same name, Missile Command Recharged gives the classic action game a complete makeover, complete with better graphics, new challenge missions, an upgraded arcade mode, cool power-ups, and a great soundtrack. But while these enhancements make the package more enticing, the fact still remains that Missile Command is difficult to play without a trackball. The analog stick is a poor substitute, and normally easy challenges are made incredibly frustrating by the imprecise gameplay. Missile Command gets so much right, yet winds up being one of the weaker entries in the Recharged franchise. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now, here's the question I have for you. What is a great game that just didn't fit on consoles? I mean, I complain about how difficult it is to bring Missile Command home, but I think we can all agree that it's far from the only game that had that problem. I mean, for starters, the real-time strategy games have had a real problem working on consoles thanks in large part to the limited gamepad. I'm excited to see your picks in the comments below. Also, if you're a fan of Atari, then you're going to want to be back on Friday when I review Atari 50. Let me tell you, that's their biggest release of 2022. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.